Some things don't disappear suddenly. They fade into assumption. They don't announce their presence anymore because they never had to. They were always there. Steady, predictable, reliable. And because they stayed, we stopped looking at them. We stopped noticing the details that once felt vivid. We stopped checking if they were still as strong as we imagined. We assume time will keep moving at the same pace. We assume people will remain reachable. We assume feelings will be available when we need them. We assume stability is permanent. Not because we made a conscious decision, but because nothing challenged the assumption. Nothing interrupted the rhythm. Nothing forced us to question what we took for granted. And in that stillness, in that quiet repetition, a strange blindness begins. We start mistaking familiarity for permanence. We start believing that what has stayed will always stay, that what has held us will never let go, that what has answered will never fall silent. Yet time has never promised such loyalty. People have never guaranteed such consistency. And feelings, they are the most delicate of all. What repeats itself becomes invisible, not because it loses value, but because it stops asking for attention. This is how presence turns into background, how comfort turns into complacency, how reliability turns into something we stop seeing, even while it's holding everything together. We rarely notice what stays. We notice what changes. We notice what breaks. We notice what leaves. Continuity feels neutral until it isn't. The mind treats consistency as safety, and safety as certainty, and certainty, when unexamined, becomes a quiet illusion. Certainty is nothing more than familiarity stretched over time. A pattern repeated so often that we forget to check whether it still fits, whether it still stands, whether it's still alive. Some things are not protected by importance. They are exposed by it. Because when something matters deeply, we assume it will survive neglect. We assume it will endure delay. We assume it will forgive absence. We assume it will remain intact. But importance does not grant immunity. It creates vulnerability. The more something matters, the more quietly we assume it cannot fall apart. And precisely because we believe that, we stop tending to it. We don't check on what has never failed us. We don't question what has always responded. We don't prepare for the absence of what has always been present. Assumption is quiet. It doesn't feel like risk. It feels like comfort. And comfort rarely asks questions. Comfort builds routines. Routines build expectations. Expectations build dependence. And dependence, when unspoken, turns into assumption. This is not carelessness, it is efficiency. The mind simplifies what it believes will not change. It allocates attention elsewhere. It saves energy by trusting patterns. But patterns don't promise permanence, they only suggest it. And suggestions are not guarantees. What is most fragile is often what feels most stable, because stability invites delay, and delay slowly becomes disregard.
We don't stop valuing things, we stop actively noticing them. And unnoticed value is vulnerable. It weakens like a structure never inspected, like a bridge never maintained, like a plant watered only when it screams for attention. But not everything screams, not everything warns, not everything announces it's fading. Some things simply withdraw, quietly, gradually, unassumingly. And by the time we notice, the change has already settled. The shift has already occurred. The loss has already taken root. This is how relationships drift, how motivation dissolves, how passion dulls, how certainty erodes. Not with a crash, but with a whisper. Not with a storm, but with a slow dimming of light. When change finally happens, it feels sudden, but it never was. It was preceded by long periods of quiet certainty, by days that required no attention, by presence that asked for nothing, by patterns that appeared unbreakable. Loss does not always come from absence. Sometimes it comes from assumption, from believing something did not need protection simply because it had always been there. We prepare for storms, not for silence. We prepare for impact, not for erosion. We prepare for endings, not for the slow fading of what we never imagined losing. And yet, the quietest changes are often the most irreversible. We understand absence quickly. We feel its sting. We hear its echo. We acknowledge its weight. Presence takes longer. It demands awareness. It requires intention. It asks to be seen, not just assumed. We measure what is gone. We rarely measure what remains. But what remains is where everything still happens, where possibility still exists, where connection can be rebuilt, where attention can return. Presence is not guaranteed. It is cultivated, maintained, chosen. And choosing presence is choosing awareness, choosing to see what has become invisible, choosing to notice what you once overlooked, choosing to protect what you once assumed unbreakable.
There are things in your life right now that you believe are permanent, not because you checked, but because they haven't left yet. We often confuse endurance with invincibility. We mistake repetition for commitment. We think the things that have remained effortlessly. But presence is rarely effortless. Presence is a choice repeated quietly, day after day, gesture after gesture, often without applause, often without recognition. This is not a warning. There is no instruction here, only awareness. Because noticing presence is the only way it ever becomes intentional. Presence is not simply the act of existing in a space, it is the act of being truly seen, truly acknowledged, truly valued. And intention is often the last thing that arrives before assumption turns into loss. Intention interrupts autopilot. Intention shifts the weight of our attention from the loud and urgent to the steady and essential. And yet, awareness can shift everything. Awareness can interrupt the fading. Awareness can restore what routine has blurred. Awareness can bring warmth to what is cooled. Awareness can resurrect what feels forgotten. Awareness is the quiet decision to stop rushing past what matters, to stop assuming that what stays requires nothing from us. Not by force, but by attention. By choosing to look again, to listen again, to care again, to step back into the moments we've trained ourselves to overlook. Because the things we think are permanent are often the things most in need of our presence.
Not dramatic gestures, not grand declarations, but steady, intentional attention. The kind that says, I see you, I still choose this, I still recognize your value. And intention, when offered consciously, has a quiet power. The power to transform what remains before it becomes what is lost. The power to anchor what drifts. The power to steady what shakes. The power to repair what cracks before it breaks. The power to keep what matters alive, current, intact. Because permanence is never guaranteed. It exists only through participation, through tending, not assuming, through noticing, not overlooking, through awareness, not habit. In the end, continuity survives not through luck, but through intention, through choosing again and again to stay awake to what stays, as far as we know.